Hi everyone, it's Tonen, and this is the Serotonin Receptor. Today's date is April 13th, 2019. We're going to talk a little bit about my truth journey, my thoughts on changing perspective. We're going to go over how to stay calm and feel centered, talk about news and disinformation in the news and its uses, and touch a little bit on Guruism. So, let's get started.
I can feel no sense of measure, no illusions as we take refuge in young man's pleasure, breaking down the dreams we make real.
One down, one to go. Another town, one more show. Downtown, getting away, but you never came back. No phone to take your place, you know what I mean. We have the same dreams with other kings.
Wow, kind of forgot how amazing that song is and how totally perfect that was. for my podcast. I was actually going to put on a completely different song from the same album. And I actually had a completely different podcast ready to go. And it was just all wrong and I had to redo it. And as I was getting all set up, this song just popped into my head. And so I went for it. And wow, it's exactly what I wanted to say. All right. So let's get started. My truth journey. I really wanted to touch on this a little bit. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but I did want to share because I don't want anyone who is listening or who goes to watch my videos on my channel that I've got it all sorted out and that you know, I don't know, that I'm sort of an expert on any of this. It's more that, you know, I have been trained to be a psychotherapist, and it is my intention in this world to reach out and help people that are struggling. And that's what I want to do. That's the purpose of my podcast. And you know, I studied for 3 years, and I had a lot of interest before that, and I worked in, you know, various ways and in my private practice for 12 years. So it's something that's part of who I am, and this is where I'm at. And it's really hard for me to talk about things that aren't about truth right now because it feels really important. It feels like it's just the time is now, and I'm not really good on small talk anyway. And I think there's a lot to be discussed and a lot to talk to each other about and to learn from each other, and those that are willing, you know, when you're ready to learn, the teacher will appear. You know, when you're ready to teach, the student will appear. I'm not entirely sure which angle I'm looking for here, but if you're listening, then you're interested, and I'm here for those that are interested. So, you know, I have struggled, and you know, I was that person falling apart, you know, in my job at the office. I had an office job for a very brief period of time, which allowed me to use a computer. And, you know, I was not holding myself together well at times in my life. And that's okay. You know, I was the person looking up alternative, you know, media sources right after big events would happen, you know, across the world. And so, you know, I don't want you to think that I've been handling myself well all this time. You know, we have our struggling times, and so I don't. It's important not to feel shame for any of those, and I think it's also really important to be honest with each other and with ourselves that it's been a really tough struggle at times. Um, but I also wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, coming to making my channel and making my videos. And I did it originally because I wanted to be part of a dialogue of, you know, sort of historical revisiting. And so my first video was actually on Chicago water cribs, based on some traveling that I did. And I actually, quite a few of the first ones were all on those. And it created a really great community for me. I immediately started getting really good response from the people who I was sort of trying to be in dialogue with. They were other YouTubers, YouTube channel people. And I ended up kind of finding a nice little community. And so I just recently had a comment from sort of the bulk of the comments that I've been getting surrounding sort of my intention for this podcast is really around people feeling very lonely and isolated. And so I've talked about finding an online community, but it sort of occurred to me last week after the podcast that creating your own online community is probably a better way to put it. And it's actually worked wonders for me. And there is a way to do it. So as I said, I started a dialogue, and that worked really well for me. So I would suggest something like that, doing a video in response to someone's work that you like. And you can, of course, you can always do that with me, but we've already created a dialogue, so I'm not sure. And yeah, I would definitely suggest, there's a lot of support out there. There are people out there who are interested in what you have to say, and but creating that dialogue with someone who's already creating work is a good way to find interested people quickly. So there, give that a try. So yeah, the journey is not easy. It's never a straight line, and it doesn't always go in a diagonal. It's there's going to be a lot of pitfalls on the way, and working on maintaining calmness, health, balancing your health, seeking out ways to connect with like-minded people so that you can maintain healthy relationships in your day-to-day life. So that's really important. We've talked about continuing with the close relationships that you have, like even though you might not be able to be truthful with those people in your life, but it's obviously very important to keep many of those relationships. So seeing your online relationships with people who are interested in similar things can help alleviate a lot of the stress where you're not feeling understood. Now, in that, obviously, you have to act ethically, and I am not going to give this advice without a caution that connecting with people online does create intimacy, and if you are in a close relationship with someone, that intimacy that you have with people online, it is unhealthy for it to overshadow the intimacy that you have with your partner. But that said, for people who do stray, they stray regardless. So I take no responsibility for this advice, but it is important, I think, for those of us that are feeling isolated in these communities to find a group that you can just share your concerns or discussion. Sometimes just having a discussion about the things that you find incredibly important that most people would freak out about is it's very gratifying, and it's also very it's important for balance. So balance is key, but I would never suggest for anyone to act unethically outside of their valuable personal relationships. Okay, so we're going to bounce around a teeny bit this week. My thoughts on changing perspective in the news, disinformation, Guruism. We're going to talk a little bit about, at the very end, just touch on the importance of meditation and grounding. And we'll wrap it up with another song, and that'll be that. So, okay, so thoughts on changing perspective. This is something that I have done a lot of. As we sift through the news, we are going to really cling to certain belief systems for a while. We're going to suddenly find that we don't really align with belief systems that we've had for a long time. And I would say that for the most part, anyone listening to this podcast is someone who has probably already sat in the discomfort of realizing that you are not the person you think you are. You have different ideas about things, or you have different beliefs about things, or things are not as they seem. So you've had to deal with this discomfort of not knowing, and had to shed, the various beliefs that you had, goodbye, 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 bad, ah, leave it, hello, hello, heaven. as they said. It is really alarming sometimes, the things that we need to let go of. And it will happen time and time again. I will say this. I found for myself it has gotten easier when I have began to assume that upon reaching a conclusion that I may leave it again, or choosing to fence sit over certain things, like the shape of the earth. I'm kind of just refusing to kind of decide on anything with that. Partially because I'm more concerned with the state it's in than the shape it's in, but also because I don't know. I don't know if it's just another Mandela effect thing, like, where it's just like to get people to nitpick. I don't know. I'm not too sure, but it sure is keeping a lot of us busy, and that could be a good thing, and that could be a bad thing, and I don't know. However, I do love watching all of those videos. I mean, it's keeping me busy. And yeah, and I'm very fascinated in, now I just kind of want to know more. That's kind of my problem. I think that's probably why I can't make a decision on it. Yeah. Anyway, so things do change. We do change our minds. We do go back to the way we used to think sometimes, and that's an interesting thing. And part of the issue, I think, around this is that people may call you out on this, especially those people who you have sort of been honest with and didn't accept that. I'm just going to go ahead and assume that some of you have talked to your friends about your beliefs and your truths, and it didn't go well. And so when you change your beliefs about things, the naysayers can kind of jump all over it. And that can be really hard. And I don't really have the most comforting advice for that, other than we really do find out who our friends are when we don't fit in the mold. And it's hard, very hard. It's like putting salt in the wound, because not only are you reeling from this new perspective, but now you're also being rejected by people who you kind of need in this moment. So yeah, been there. So it is hard to accept your changing perspectives, but I will say this. You are infinitely more important to yourself than your friends are to you. Not that friends aren't important, but you are number one over friends, because you are the person you have to live the rest of your life with. You're this body, you're this is your consciousness. This is how you think. And I don't know how much more other than our own consciousness we could be. So always be gentle with yourself. But especially, with changing perspective, the I told you so's may come, they may not. But don't let it stop you from discarding something that does no longer serve you, that does not work, that does not fit. So, and sometimes I know it sounds kind of funny because you've already discarded, the main narrative. But sometimes when we fought so hard to discard the main narrative, we go to an alternate. It's even harder to discard the new alternate than it was the main, if you know what I mean. So, it's a tricky one. I also wanted to touch a little bit on in the news that disinformation gets used a lot. And that does add to our changing perspective. It's also something that continues our discomfort a lot of the time. The news has been really spicy lately. Like, there's just so much going on. It's crazy. And I would, suggest, if you're open to suggestion, in terms of advice, which you are free to take or not take, to curb your enthusiasm and also your despair. So disinformation is super important. I've been realizing lately that Trump is kind of like a art of warfare master. He's like this kung fu like master. He's also a chess grandmaster or something. And so the tactics that are being used right now are warfare tactics, like military. I mean, they always are, but they're more so. I mean, they always have been, but more so important to understand that at this point. Um, this is still what's happening right now. There's still tons of disinformation going on. And the most important part of disinformation is to create such confusion about clarity that nobody really knows what's going on, least of all us. But I will say, I have been very, very lucky in my training as a psychotherapist. One of the things that we were taught time and time again was to trust the process. And so it's enabled me to sort of sit in that discomfort of not knowing and seeing chaos before me and not thinking, okay, well, this is just not working. Like, obviously, because with clients, sometimes you think you're getting somewhere and you're not. And then suddenly, it looks like things are going downhill, but maybe they had to hit bottom or whatever. Like, I don't know. But you never know the full story. And yeah, just, to trust the process of the work that you're doing together. And I can say this, we are all standing up, we're all paying attention, we're all doing our own research, we are all much more intelligent and inquisitive and less likely to be tricked than ever. And I think it's really, really important that we understand that although things may look bad, that we never know what it may lead to. There's a really wonderful story, it's a philosophical story, and I believe it is Chinese in origin, about a traveler who is regaling a story of their journey. And they find a gold coin, and the person who's listening is like, "Oh, how fortunate!" And they're like, "Actually, it wasn't, because then I was robbed, and the robber struck me in the eye." And the person listening says, "Oh, that's terrible." And he says, "Actually, it wasn't, because when he struck me in the eye, it, corrected my, vision that was, bad for many years, or he stopped the ringing in my ear, or, something like that." And so as he keeps describing the journey and these seemingly obvious good and bad occurrences, it turns out that although at the outset it may have seemed like this was the fortunate incident, it created misfortune, and the one that seemed like the unfortunate incident created fortune. So very, in times like these allegories and these philosophical stories are very helpful. But I do recognize that I have been fortunate to have been trained to trust the process, because it's not something that comes naturally to me at all. So, but do understand that disinformation is out there. There's tons of it, and it is incredibly useful and necessary for information warfare and spiritual warfare, like with, any type of sort of strategic moves needed to win a battle, basically. So, win a war. I think it might be a good time to take a break.
told us Eve has leukemia.
All right. All right, so this is our final piece for today's podcast, Guruism, and how to tell who to trust and signs to look for. So, what is Guruism? Well, let's take the ism away from the word, and you've got guru now. So, our final segment for this week's podcast is Guruism, how to tell who to trust and signs to look for. So, Guruism is kind of the main issue, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is because it is probably one of the most prevalent issues in the world right now, is people glorifying the person and not heeding the message. It's sort of the opposite of shoot the messenger, which is when people hear something they don't like, and so they blame the person who told them the information. Guruism is the opposite. When they like something they hear, they begin to worship the person who said the good thing instead of actually changing their behavior and doing the good thing, or adopting that behavior that they admire in the person that they're now worshiping. So rather than doing that, they just sort of begin to admire and worship the person who does the thing they admire. So as you can see, I like to talk myself in right back down into a circle. So Guruism is really prevalent. I mean, it's sort of the basis of all world religions. In every religion, there's a worshipped earthly person. And rarely do the followers of these religions actually follow the benevolent actions of the person, or perhaps one of the problems is that they do follow step by step the malevolent actions of the people they worship, but the benevolent, unfortunately, among us have difficulty following the actions of those they worship. So what do we do? How do we deal with Guruism? First of all, I think it's really important to check yourself. I think we're all, sort of vulnerable to Guruism. It's really easy to imagine that someone is better than us because they seem to do things that, or outwardly it seems as though they are more ethically gifted than we are, or they are just, better people, so to say. They act in a more kindly and wonderful manner and help, bring about positive change around them and that kind of thing. I think it's really important to, first of all, check yourself for this. Those of us that are more likely to fall into these traps are people who are not feeling very happy with themselves initially. And so I think it's really important to direct any over-the-top admiration of others, to try to curb that and find why it is not as possible for one to, for you to give that to yourself. We've talked a little bit in the past about the analogy of the tall grass field, and as we continue to create new paths, so this is our neural pathway, and we have a regular way of self-talk, and if we want to change that self-talk for something that is more beneficial to us, it is tantamount to walking through a field of tall grass and creating a new path in the grass. So the first couple times you do it, it doesn't feel comfortable. You have grass in the face, you may have cuts on your body. You might realize you should have brought some tools with you or dressed better. You could have been better prepared, that kind of thing. And these are all wonderful analogies. And I really do love analogies of plant life and gardening when I talk a lot about the psyche, because It just fits very well. It's probably one of the reasons why I enjoy doing horticultural therapy and why it has been so popular for so long. So those of you that do garden and are familiar with plants, it is very useful to begin to see your psyche and your mind as a garden. And for example, a wonderful analogy is when we weed every day in our gardens, it makes it really easy for the things that we want to have grow, our intended growth to grow and to reach the sunlight. If you leave the weeds for too long, there's no harm will come to your garden. You can weed, but it will take longer and more effort. And the things that you had intended to grow might not have grown so well in the time when the weeding didn't occur. So it's super important to feel that you are absolutely strong enough and resilient enough to withstand many weeds in your garden. You are able to cope with and handle many weeds. It may cause work later, but nothing will be destroyed. And it's very important, I think, for all of us to understand that human beings are incredibly strong. We are beautifully created beings, and we have been given the best of everything as far as the narrative that I align with, which is that we are an intended species. Human beings are, and I don't know if that fits in a uncomfortable way for you. But I believe that we were created with intention. And so I believe that we've been given the best of everything, and we are incredibly resilient. And so I want to convey that in a positive way for all of us to understand that we can withstand many hardships. And come out with work, of course, with personal work done, we can come out the other side brilliantly. So do not despair. However, tend your own garden. This is part of the Guruism. A guru is someone who you're basically calling in a professional to take care of your garden, in a sense. Now, as a former psychotherapist, of course, there's some conflicting feelings about that, because I do believe there's a lot of people out there really wanting to help. But Guruism does there's plenty of it in psychotherapy. I mean, it doesn't have to be Tony Robbins or, I don't know, Sai Baba. I'm not talking about like international gurus. I'm talking about everyday people. Some people might have yoga teachers that smack of Guruism. It's like narcissism, right? You don't have to be famous to be a narcissist, although I would garner that many famous people are narcissists. I don't think it's easy to get famous. I mean, unless you're really in love with the craft, which everybody says they are. But anyway, the craft. Oh, wow. Yeah, just caught myself etymologically with that one. Moving on from witchcraft. So Guruism is probably a form of witchcraft as well. But it is giving power. It's giving your personal power over to someone else. It's giving it's a form of giving over your opinion and allowing someone else to dictate or have too much influence, perhaps, in your decision making. So, however, don't necessarily throw out the message with the guru, because sometimes these messages that they have are very incredible. So just be careful. Just, have confidence in yourself. You may feel like you're struggling and things aren't going well, but you're awake, and that's huge. I mean, oh my goodness, that is hugely huge. That's a very big deal. And congratulations for waking up and for being here. Okay, so that is Guruism. So how to tell who to trust and signs to look for. So this is just very brief. And I can get more into this if people feel that this is necessary and want more detail. But the basic things to look for would be, over time, it's very hard to tell immediately, some people, if they kind of are considering themselves a guru. Definitely, if you're someone who's very sensitive to that kind of overzealous store clerk who like wants to sell you everything, that's the kind of stuff you will probably like rub you the wrong way really easily. And that's something to definitely to look for. People who I think are over enthusiastic, who seem to be glossing over things and have sort of an superhuman kind of ness around them, like a bit of a fakery, I suppose, a veneer. And it's I think a lot of us are very good with seeing the veneer. And that can come in all kinds of forms. It can come in tone of voice, body language, strain, muscles in the face. If you are someone that has trouble reading people's body language, this is not going to help you. So I do apologize, because I'm going to kind of get into this a little bit, but body language is a big, big thing. And in fact, so interesting to me. And if you're not good at body language, I don't know if it's something that you can learn or not. Because I think some of us are very in tune with it and some of us just don't see that kind of thing. But if it is something you can learn, I really want to recommend that all of you go to, there's a YouTube channel, there's a couple of them for body language, and there's one called like Ghost something. It's got Ghost in the name of the person who does the who runs the channel. And this person's a professional, or is studying, and they go through things that you would have seen like on the news, interviews and stuff. So it's familiar information, or at least it can be seen. What they're deconstructing is a video that you can easily find yourself in another format, like without the deconstruction. And they go through, body positioning, tone of voice, lilting, eyes, different things, when people are telling the truth and when they're searching for their story. So when it's a known memory or a recorded, like learned memory. Very interesting stuff. And myself on a personal level find that stuff absolutely fascinating. But body language is it's phenomenally interesting, and can give you such an in-depth idea of what's going on for someone. So I highly recommend because one thing I was going to say is, or one thing I was realizing when I was doing this, is that there's the people that guru-ize themselves in your everyday life, the people you meet. So it could be your yoga teacher, it could be the person at the health food store, it could be your sister, your brother, whoever it is. It could be someone who you see online. Now, the fakery is harder to determine online, because some people really do kind of prepare for their videos and stuff. I'm clearly not one of those people. I'm sure you've heard, like last week's episode, it was like 3 a.m. I was just like, oh no, I didn't do an episode. And I really wanted to be consistent. But my, in the actual, like if you think of all the videos that I've done, all the podcasts, it probably wasn't a very consistent one. I was probably pretty exhausted. My mind was wandering. So I apologize to all of you, and I really apologize to the ones that actually made it through the whole video. But it was something that, I realize it's not so easy, because some people really do they're very good at like presenting themselves for their videos. So just, this is you have to kind of massage these points a little bit for online people and book, personalities and like those kinds of like celebrity guru people and the people who are in your everyday life. Inconsistency in their, and we're all human, so we're all going to be inconsistent, because that's kind of what makes us human, because we're moody and stuff. But large inconsistencies can be very telling. So if they suddenly change their opinion, not if they change their opinion, if they suddenly seem really negative, like if there's, it's inconsistencies in personality is what you're looking for, not necessarily in what they're saying, because people do change their mind about things, but their personality won't necessarily change about it. Like they might like, you know what, I was wrong about this, but what we're looking for is consistency in personality. Another sign of Guruism would be people that are really dogmatic, that kind of follow a very specific way of being. I would be really cautious about that. And chances are you're going to be misled by most people, that now, okay, that said, there are some harmless posers out there. And those people are probably not so worrisome. But there's also a lot of harmful opportunists out there. So these are the ones that I'm really kind of talking about. So there may be people who are, trying to be someone that they're not, or there might be people who have a lot to share and a lot to give, but they're also struggling with their own personal issues. So it's more about the people who are there to sell you something, push you something. The ones that are the opportunists. These are the ones that this is more of a cautionary list for this type of guru. More things to look for. Changes in attitude and consistency in personality. Dogmatism. So being dogmatic are, they're following a set of rules. So a dogma is sort of an agreed upon narrative that explains something. Okay. And so people who are overly dogmatic or who are dogmatic at all are, I would be very cautious of that, because there has been a lot of corruption in all of these sort of well-known and well-established movements, so to speak. And I use that term because I'm not just talking about religion. I'm talking about ideologies. I'm talking about New Ageism. I'm talking about yoga even. I mean, yoga especially, actually. There was many years ago, I was working in a building. I think I talked about this already in a podcast, but it bears repeating. I was working in a building where someone was actually doing a yoga class in the sort of communal space outside my office. And it was Justin Bieber yoga, and it was people doing yoga to Justin Bieber music. And I thought the whole thing was so just sacrilegious. I thought it was just such an offense to everything. I couldn't believe it. So I actually ended up Googling it. Now, of course, you have to understand, I've been kind of alert and aware for a long time. I've been living down the rabbit hole for many, many years. And so I came across almost immediately, because of the types of searches and the kind of websites that I go to, that there is all kinds of death metal, black death metal and heavy metal yoga classes out there. Now, I am a big fan of certain types of metal from the 70s and the 80s, because it's just what I grew up on. I mean, I can't, it was sort of there will always be a soft spot in my heart for a couple of different Black Sabbath albums. And so I hope that doesn't upset you guys. This is, I was a teenager. It was all of ignorance, but some of these songs they're just beautiful, actually. And anyway, I think there's a lot of questioning I have around that whole band, to be honest with you. I think they were led down a merry path. Anyway, I have, so this Justin Bieber class, I found out that there was all these heavy metal yoga classes that were happening basically all over the country, all over the US. And people were, very concerned about this, because yoga itself is an energetic practice. It's about harnessing and releasing energy. And the decision for it to be, the intention of your energy, I should say, comes from the practitioner, the person practicing that yoga. So why bring up Guruism at all? What is the harm? Well, as I said earlier, we are very, very strong, resilient people, species. We are very powerful, and although we are resilient enough to withstand the diversion of a guru, I do believe that it is a waste of our time and a waste of our energy. And although it's not sort of the end of the world, and I do believe that most of the people out there that are sort of putting themselves in these positions are only doing so because they genuinely want to better themselves and help other people. However, much or little their ego takes part in that. I don't believe even the most egotistical guru who is not an ill-intentioned opportunist. Despite their ego, I do think that they're trying to come from a good place, even if they are full of themselves. It's really the people that are going to divert your good energy and take you off your path and harm you that are the ones to really be careful of. However, it's more than that. It's more of what I'm trying to address, I think, in all of this, if I can understand myself here, is that I don't want any of us to continue giving away our own personal power. That being overly enthusiastic about someone over their message is a waste of our energy. And I want us to achieve heaven faster here. I want us to have an amazing planet. And I think we can get there if we're all feeling better about who we are and understanding how incredible we all are and what we have yet to uncover about ourselves. Once we finish cleansing our bodies, our planet, and our psyches of all of this garbage that has been littered amongst us. So, yeah, I guess that's really my intention for talking about the Guruism. Anyway, let's wrap this up here. I think this is a good place to stop. I hope you guys are enjoying your weather wherever you are. I hope you're taking care of each other. I hope that it's been an interesting and helpful podcast. I hope to hear from you. And please do send me your questions and comments to sarah.tonen.receptor@gmail.com. That's sarah.receptor@gmail.com. I'm looking forward to hearing from you all. Have a wonderful week. Enjoy your weather, and God bless.
Love is but a song we sing, fears we will die. You can make the mountains rain, or make the angels cry. Though the good is on the way, and you may not know why. Come on, people now, smile on your brother, everybody get together, try to love one another. surely pays. When the one that left us here returns for us at last, we are but a moment's sunlight fading in the grass. Come on, people now, smile on your brother. Everybody get together, try to love one another right now. Come on, people now, smile on your brother. Everybody get together, try to love one another right now. Come on, people now, smile on your brother. Everybody get together, try to love one another right now. If you hear the song I sing, you will understand. Listen. You hold the key to love and fear, all in your trembling hand. Just one key unlocks them both. It's there